Hello there, I'm Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church of Greene County, Tennessee, and today I'm with
Aaron Wymer, senior minister at Grandview Christian Church in Johnson City, Tennessee.
Yes, indeed. And we're going to have a coffee convo. Awkward pause. Friendly reminder, we are live, so jump in the comments. Let us know you're here. If you're new with us tonight and you're perhaps from Grandview Christian Church or you're a Wymer, you're a friend of Aaron's and you're with us, we're super glad you're here. Let us know you're here. Type in some comments. Help direct the convo.
Helpful comments, please.
Helpful comments, embarrassing comments, stories you'd like to unpack, etc. And we'll do that. So thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, even though I wasn't your first choice.
So let's talk about Paul Helfenstein.
Let's talk about Paul Helfenstein.
We'll get there soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, let's just talk about Paul Helfenstein.
Let's start off right there. So enough about you. Paul Helfenstein is a friend of ours,
Yes.
and the three of us are together on Mondays doing some sermon prep and Collab, and so that's part of how Aaron and I have been good buds for a long time. But Aaron and I precede Paul
Yes.
in our friendship, going back 20-something-ish years or something like that.
Yeah, very far. Meeting in an unlikely place.
Yes.
Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yes, University of Kentucky for my mom's cancer surgery.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you had, was it Palm Pilot stuff?
It was a Palm Pilot.
You had all the Palm Pilot gadgets ever
Yes.
known to exist at the time.
Yes.
Which are now in a trash heap somewhere.
They are.
Yeah.
They may exist somewhere, but
But that was the first time I ever saw them, and you had them.
I did.
You were on the cutting edge.
And I was
Palm
cutting
Pilotry.
edge because I had, at that point, they had just come out with the little keyboard that unfolded and
This has to be fascinating for everyone, doesn't it? Let's talk about nerdy gadgets.
Let's talk
Scott
about
had 20 years
Scott,
ago.
and it's Aaron's turn. We've already talked about Paul. We've already talked about Scott. So
Have you figured out I deflect?
I am aware of that,
Okay.
yes. And I already know some of the answers to those questions that we'll ask about you later on. But tell us, Aaron Wymer, who you are, how you got here, family of origin, siblings, current family, etc.
Well, I'll start with current family. I'm a father of 3 wonderful daughters.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 fantastic sons-in-law, one of which is on staff here at First Christian Church.
Yes?
And I have...
Which is your favorite son-in-law?
They are both so fantastic that, I've noticed that on Instagram and that kind of thing, they'll have National Siblings Day. They don't have a hashtag National Sons-in-Law Day. And I think I need to start that.
Ooh, tonight.
Yeah.
This is the moment.
This is the beginning.
The magic just happened.
National Sons-in-Law Day. I just have to get pictures of the 2 of them together, and then I can put that out there.
That's a good idea. All right.
Yeah.
Keep going. Tell us.
Wonderful wife. We met in 1985 at the University of Florida in an anthropology class.
Anthro.
Yes. And
The study of humans.
yes, study of humans. Dr. Rice was the professor. And I took good notes. And she missed a couple classes as a morning class and was looking for someone who had notes that looked good, and I looked like I had good notes.
You looked like you had good notes.
She tapped me on this shoulder and said, "Hey, can I borrow your notes?"
Boom.
And we started talking. So,
And from there you had kids.
not,
here we are.
Not immediately.
No. Oh, okay.
There's a whole story. There's a whole story that goes in before that. But yeah.
So you and Cindy met in, what'd you say, 1980?
It would have been 1985, my freshman year at the University of Florida.
Cool.
So, and also I have a grandson as of almost 2 years ago.
Yes, indeed.
That's been just fantastic. So that's my family, my immediate family now.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up as one of 6 kids.
Yep.
And we're all still close. They're super important to me. In fact, they're in a text chain right now. I have 17 messages. I can't keep up with it.
Nice.
But they're super important to me, and
That's good. That's cool.
My mom and dad, wonderful parents. Father was a contractor, had a construction company.
You grew up on that job in a sense.
Yes,
didn't you?
yes. My dad had me and my brother working Saturdays, holidays, that kind of thing. Work was pretty much second to church for my dad. That was it. I mean,
And this was not a small company.
It wasn't huge, but yeah, he usually had around 15 to 20, 25 employees, depending on the time.
Yeah.
I
just drove by one of the malls that your dad helped build just a week ago.
Yeah, you were up in Indianapolis.
I was.
Wow. He did a lot of work, a lot of churches. In fact, his goal was to build churches. That was
really?
one of the things he really wanted to do.
Huh.
The problem was there wasn't always a lot of money in that, and so he also did strip malls and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Couple schools. So anyway, that's what he did. He worked very hard. He started that company really in his early 20s. Started working construction as a kid, about 14 years old, and just brilliant when it came to that.
Yeah, you've told me about your dad before, where someone like him with that kind of experience walks into a room or sees a building and sees things instantly that others don't. Yes,
and the whole world was either level and plumb. He saw it everywhere he went. He could tell you if that floor was out of level at all.
Cool.
And my mom, similar, just wonderful woman. Spent a lot of time caring for others. Had a Tuesday morning Bible study for women my whole life.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never heard that. That's cool.
She had that, and they had a Bible study on Tuesday nights for couples as well.
I've heard
for a
that.
long time.
Yes, that's cool.
I remember one year we'd go to a park in the summer sometimes for the Tuesday morning Bible study, and I remember one Tuesday nobody showed up, and so we're playing in the park, and I saw my mom just sitting on a blanket reading her Bible, and I felt sorry for her, And I ran over and sat on her lap. I was pretty little. I remember this, and I remember just feeling sorry for her. Now that I'm older, I know she was really enjoying some alone time. I wish this boy would go play on the slide. Yeah,
have a break. Oh, hi, Aaron. Glad you're here.
Glad you're here, son.
Okay,
go play. Yeah.
Have a seat.
So
let me nurture you again.
All that. So.
And that reminds me, you've talked about this before. I've heard you talk about your growing up life in that home. People constantly in and out.
Yeah.
Your parents had people in all of the time. And you had lots of siblings, of course. But
if somebody knocked, it was because they didn't know you. The door would just open and they would come in anytime. So you never knew who was coming in the door next.
Yeah. We're already getting questions, and we'll get there, y'all. Don't you worry. Tell us about your love for your love of being a Hoosier. And what it means to be a Hoosier, and your love for Indy.
Yeah, I've lived now in Tennessee longer than I ever lived in Indianapolis.
20.
I grew up in the same house in Indianapolis till I was 18 and went to college.
Okay.
Came back for 3 years, so I spent 21 years in Indiana.
Okay.
4 and then 7 years in Florida, and the rest of the time spent in Tennessee.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
And you've been at Grandview now 20.
Almost 23 years.
3 years. Yeah. Okay.
And just growing up in Indiana, that's all you know. And there's a certain amount of we know we're not important in Indiana that just pervades it, which is why I still love IndyCar racing.
Yeah.
Because the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was one thing that gave me an identity in Indianapolis growing up. Like, this is important.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. When we didn't have the Colts back then. The Pacers were ABA when I was little.
That's
it was
right.
Just, it wasn't a lot of stuff, but everybody knew the Indianapolis 500.
And it was a sense of identity.
Yeah, very much.
And you grew up close to it.
Yes.
I've been to that. You've shown me that. And you and I went to, what was it? An IndyCar place that makes them.
A Dallara factory, perhaps? Did we go there?
I guess.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Grew up very close to Speedway. My mom went to Speedway High School. And
really? It's called that?
Yeah. It's called Speedway High School. The Speedway spark plugs. Yeah.
Shut up.
Yes.
The Speedway spark plugs.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Don't make my Hoosier friends mad.
I mean, it's super cool, y'all.
Yeah.
It's so cool. You Indy people with your spark plug mascots.
Yes.
My wife's high school, they're the Dutch, because in Holland, Michigan, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much. They're all 6 feet, blonde hair, blue eyes. and they are the only high school band whose mascot. No. They're the only high school band that wears wooden shoes.
Really?
Yeah, that's their thing.
That doesn't sound fun for marching.
It's not really that cool.
No.
Spark plugs is even cooler, maybe.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you,
Okay.
and then we'll get to Paul Helfenstein soon.
Oh, well, we can just go straight to Paul.
Should
if
we?
you'd like, yeah.
Yeah. Let's
start with the smile. I mean, his smile is fantastic.
Smiley Paul is what we call him.
Oh, yeah, Broadway Paul.
Broadway Paul.
Yeah.
Jazz hands Paul.
Yeah.
Aaron and I decided. I texted Paul a little bit before this and said, "Hey, Paul, if you can, jump in because Aaron's live on Coffee Convos with me in 15 minutes." And I gave him the link to it here, and he said, "I'll be there. Don't let him do better than me."
That's not possible, Paul.
I've set the bar really high. So we decided. I texted Paul and Aaron and said, "Paul has just ensured we talk about him a lot today."
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what about Paul Helfenstein? Tell us about Paul.
I met Paul. I remember the first time I saw Paul.
Everybody does remember the first time.
Yeah, I just moved here. He was a student at Milligan.
Really?
Yes. And he was in a play around Christmas time that they used to do in the cafeteria there.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a radio show from 1941 or 1942. I forget. And I thought that guy, that's apple pie right there. that guy is all American. I could tell right away. Yeah.
Yes, that's good. I don't remember, now that I've said that everyone remembers the first time, I don't remember the first time I met Paul. I think he was in the ether of people that I knew. And so I knew him secondhand before I knew him firsthand.
And you're the one who suggested we invite him into our preaching group, if you recall.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't recall.
Because Derek
at all.
had left to go to out west.
Yes.
And Derek Murphy and the two of us, that was the first.
That was the first Linklings.
Yeah, that was the first one. And then when he left, it left a gaping hole. Because D-Rock was gone. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And you mentioned bringing in Paul, and so off we went.
Paul says, "I'm loving the programming. Keep talking, Paul."
Exactly. As long as we're talking Paul, we're not talking me, and that's good.
And that's a good segue. Tell us, Aaron, one of six. Are you a fighter or a peacemaker?
Peacemaker, absolutely.
No question.
Yeah.
There's something you said earlier about that. On the Enneagram?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm an Enneagram 9 for
9.
what that's worth.
I don't know them well at all.
All those things, it's important to remember, all those personality things, they're pointers, but they don't tell the whole story.
Correct.
But it's pretty dead on for me, the desire for everybody to be happy. And it can lead to not taking strong stands. But it's also someone who tends to be able to see both sides of things.
Yeah.
Multiple sides, I should say, of things.
Yes. Like the Gilligan's Island story.
Yeah. Do you want to hear the Gilligan Island story again?
I think our people should hear.
This is formative for me, that I would remember a scene from Gilligan's Island.
Way back when. Now, how old do you think you were?
I must have been very little, because I tried to watch it again once as an adult, and it's unwatchable. But I loved it as a kid, because we had 3 channels.
Oh, yeah.
And if something that kids could watch was on, it was a big deal. But I just remember Skipper and the professor arguing about something, and Gilligan standing in the middle saying, "You're right, Skipper. You're right, Professor. You're right, Skipper. You're right, Professor." And then finally, Skipper gets upset and says, "Oh, Gilligan, we both can't be right." And he says, "You're right, Skipper." And
you identified with that.
I did, because when people are arguing, I can usually see that they're both right.
Sure. And that's not untrue.
It's not untrue. It's also not always helpful, because you have to, when you have to pick a way forward.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You have to make a decision one way or another.
Yeah.
Or even if it's in the middle, it still takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
To get to those decisions.
Let me ask another thing, piggybacking off of that, and then we'll get to some questions here. How for you in ministry has being a peacemaker been helpful? And what are some ways that's been not as helpful? Or you struggled with it?
It's hard for me to tell, because
because you're living your life.
Because I'm in the middle of it, yeah.
Yes.
And I understand why people feel like they do. And
Sure.
so And that way it's helpful, makes me, I think, somewhat empathetic, more so than I would be otherwise, even with divergent views.
Yes.
Where it's not helpful sometimes is leadership requires picking a way forward and sort of being willing to be wrong, but you got to move forward, even if you have to correct later for being wrong.
Right.
You have to pick a way forward, or you never get anywhere.
Would you say, for you in ministry, and I often kind of save some of this stuff for later on in the conversation, but this is good. Would you say earlier on in ministry, because you've been in ministry now for almost 30 years?
Yeah.
Would you say early on in ministry you were more peacemaker and now you're less, or you were less earlier and you're more peacemaker now?
It's a good question. Early on in the ministry, there wasn't as much writing on my decisions. So early on, I was supporting the person who was making the decisions. And that's really easy for me. Because whichever way they decide to go, pretty much, I can make a case for that in my head and be fine with it. And so once I became a senior minister, it took me a while to develop what that meant for picking a path forward. And I'm very grateful to Grandview because they're patient with me. I had not been a senior minister when Grandview hired me.
That's right. You were associate of everything in Florida.
Yeah, and one of my goals when I first got to Grandview, realizing that they hired someone like me, was to help them to get farther down the line so they would never hire someone with that little experience again to be their senior minister.
You have succeeded.
I hope so. I know. We'll see. We'll see.
That's good. So we'll come back to some, Aaron stuff and ministry and leadership and all that good stuff soon. But we have a load of questions. Thank you, y'all. And I won't name who the people are that are asking them.
I might be able to tell from the question.
But Tommy wants to know. Aaron, show everyone a picture of your sermon notes or artwork. They are super cool.
I don't have one on me.
You don't have one on you. Do y'all still post them on Twitter?
No. I used to post them on, I think it was Tumblr. But nobody ever looked. So, it's a cool idea to see once, but it's not worth looking at every week.
Explain it to us.
Basically, from reading a book called The Jazz of Preaching, at the time I was preaching from a manuscript, and I did not like preaching from a manuscript because it felt like I had to stay in this lane and I wasn't interacting with the people who were listening at all. And I read a book called The Jazz of Preaching by Kirk Byron Jones.
And you did a workshop on that at the North American Christian Convention.
Yes.
I remember being there.
Yeah, and his discussion of preaching was it's a co-creation between the preacher and the people listening. So it's not just what you decide to say. And he got that from watching jazz musicians who play off the audience. Yeah. And so in thinking about that, I just tried to come up with a way to do my notes that would allow me to say what I want to say, but realize and not take a rabbit trail so that I can't get back onto point. And so I just came up with a system of drawing pictures or words that I could look quickly and see, this is where I want to get to, this is where I am, and now I can improvise in between that.
It's a little more pictures than words.
It used to be more pictures. I'm finding it's more words now. I don't know if it's because making the notes takes a lot of time. And so and drawing pictures especially. But I enjoy doing it. It's just laborious.
It's pretty cool though. I tried it for a bit and failed miserably, and it took a ton of time. And I am not remotely artsy and cool. I'm really boring and wordsy and abstract ideas-y. Yeah. So it not so great.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive though. Artsy,
they may not
words, and abstract.
They may not be. Yeah. Well, abstraction and certainly aren't. Hey, Aaron and Scott, your guys' introduction reminded me of a super important question I have had for many, many days. This is from Tyson. Thanks, Tyson. What's the difference between a lead pastor and a senior minister? Very important question. Lead pastor and a senior minister.
I have no idea. It's just words on a page, as far as I can tell. I think it depends on how cool you are as to what you. And senior might evoke age.
Yes.
And
And you're a senior minister.
I am a senior. I'm now.
And you're older than me, and I'm a lead pastor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think we technically went multi-site maybe a little before you did.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So I think that means that I'm cooler.
Okay. That didn't need to be said. It's like saying
you do have the beard.
Yeah. Well.
That's senior. That's senior.
That's senior. Yeah.
Or at least
It's
sagacity
also,
in theory.
If I had hair, I might not have the beard. He's just trying to keep things even.
Do you think Scott would ride motorcycles with you?
I wonder if you have the concentration it takes to ride a motorcycle. I can see you winding up in a ditch really fast.
I could probably hyper-focus for a good long while.
Yeah.
But that's only if I'm taking my Adderall. Where is your favorite place to go and thing to do when you have time alone to spend?
Time alone to spend?
Alone time.
I haven't been able to ride lately much, but yeah.
I haven't heard you talk cycles much lately.
Just riding motorcycle off in a direction that I don't choose in advance.
You just go.
Just go and start making turns and going where you want to go.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, my dad's family used to take some vacations that way.
Yeah.
Get to the end of the road and make a decision.
I can't imagine our family doing that.
I can't imagine doing it without GPS on the phone anymore.
Well, my wife is really good at planning, and so that wouldn't be her idea of a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, mine either.
Now, when I've been on vacation alone, like spent time alone in London. I had a day, and I like to wander. I like to be surprised by what's about to happen, and that can lead to great things or tedious things. You never know.
Really awesome moments or a lot of wasted time.
Yes.
If you had to change careers, what would you do and why?
I ask myself that every day.
Ooh, nice.
No,
I've got my answer ready at the ready.
You want to serve ice cream.
Ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm going into ice cream.
I am so trained for ministry that I don't know what else I would do.
I feel that way too. I'm not sure. It's like, who would I be?
I got a doctorate in ministry. I mean, that's so down the path.
And you got to keep justifying that degree. And all that time spent and money and woof. So, favorite bike route for pretty views?
Oh, well, you're talking, of course, Blue Ridge Parkway.
A well-known,
yeah,
famous route.
And the best part of Blue Ridge Parkway is if you hop on at the on-ramp right after Crossnore in North Carolina, and then
right after crossing over?
Crossnore.
Oh, Crossnore.
which is right after Newbern.
Oh.
So you hit Newbern, North Carolina, then Crossnore, and then there's an on-ramp to the Blue Ridge Parkway. Go south, and that's fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah.
Crossnore. Best thing about Florida?
The state or the school?
It's your question to answer.
I loved living in Florida. There's a laid backness in Florida that I really resonate with.
Laid backness.
Yeah. Is that a word?
It is now. Words become words because of usage.
Yeah.
What you learned most from being a dad to all girls?
Oh, that's a good question. I learned I loved being a father of daughters.
Yeah.
I learned how different each one was from the start.
Yeah.
Before I became a father, I thought you kind of to treat each kid equally, you would treat them the same. But they're so different that's not how that works.
It's interesting. To treat them equally means you have to treat some things differently.
Yeah. Because they have different strengths, different concerns, all that stuff. So there's that. I just think, I have 4 sisters, so I had lots of practice. My 2 youngest sisters are considerably younger. So I was probably 9 and 11 or 12 when the last 2 were born. So I had to change diapers. I had to watch them a lot, and so I felt prepared to raise daughters in a way I wouldn't have been for sons. Huh. But now that I have a grandson, I'm finding what that's like,
and sons-in-law.
not as a parent, but as a grandparent.
Good stuff. And speaking of Paul Helfenstein,
Yes, let's do that.
let's do that. He says A.E. Whittam once said that the
Yes.
Globetrotters episode was more formative for me. It's got some layers.
Yeah, that's got some layers. He's referring. Scott is of course. Paul is of course referring to one of my heroes in the faith.
Yes. Who's A.E. Whittam?
A.E. Whittam.
He spelled it correctly here too.
Yeah. Well, that's
Nothing.
because I mention him so often, right?
Yes, that's because Paul and I should know how to spell A.E. Whittam.
He was a Methodist minister who lived in England in the early part of the 20th century and did little articles for a Methodist newspaper. And after he died, they were put into books. They were posthumously published.
And was that the only writing the outlet he had? He didn't write books?
He didn't write books. It was all collected after he died.
Okay.
I found one of those books in a used bookstore in Johnson City.
And is that how you came across Whittam in the first place?
Just
really?
At Moody's bookstore.
At the old Moody's bookstore.
Yeah.
And for the record, y'all listening, we have among us perhaps the world expert on A.E. Whittam.
Absolutely. Nobody really remembers him except his
Actual family?
Yeah, his grandson, who I'm in contact with.
Yeah. Which is cool.
And his grandson, if this pandemic ever gets over and I ever get money to travel to England again, his grandson and I will go look at papers to A. Whittam's brother's papers are collected at Exeter College in England because his brother was an author, just a novelist, and so
just a novelist.
My A. Whittam's grandson would like for the two of us to go and do research on those letters.
That's super cool.
Yeah. I would enjoy that if it ever can happen. If you want to pray about something, pray that I get to go back to England and do that because I love going to England and exploring.
Sure, yeah. And speaking of Paul Helfenstein, he says, I'm definitely a lead pastor. And
he's not just a lead pastor, he is an elite pastor.
a lead pastor. You can't make a fancy cup of coffee on a hog. That's true. That's a problem. You can't make coffee on a motorcycle.
Who asked that
So
question?
he's saying that I would never make it on a motorcycle on a ride with you, which is...
Well, I would never ride something that's called a hog anyway.
Is it uncool to call it a hog?
Well, no, that's a different kind of motorcycle that I ride.
Oh.
That's more like the Harley Davidson stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more sport touring.
Sport touring.
Sleeker.
Is sport touring kind of like a category?
Yes. You sit up instead of down.
Oh, okay.
And so you can lean into corners a little more. You can see better. I just prefer it. Yeah, I just prefer it.
Sport touring. What are the kind of categories of motorcycles?
I'm
always interested in sort of like the specific language about things that
Well, there's the sport bikes, which are the ones you lean over on.
Okay, sure.
And that's not me either.
And that's like racing.
Yeah, and your back hurts
crotch
on
rocket
that.
kind
You
of
sit up
things.
pretty straight on a sport touring bike for the most part.
Okay, so what'd you call it? Sport racing?
It's just a racing bike, a sport bike.
And so what we call a crotch rocket or something like that,
yeah,
with the guys with the crazy helmet things.
Which I've always said, the mohawk that you can get for, if I could get something, it would be like a receding hairline for that.
Nice.
So, because nothing says I don't really ride a motorcycle. I haven't been riding a motorcycle that long, like the mohawk on the helmet.
That's good. And then speaking of Paul Helfenstein, finally, he said he was making those places up. Thank you for your contributions tonight, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. We love you, Paul.
Yes, indeed.
And that's true. We do.
That is. We do. What were we talking about before Paul? We were going through questions.
Is there life before Paul?
I'm
not sure.
We do still have quite a few questions here. If you guys, we got to get through these questions because we got to get to some serious leadership ministry stuff.
Okay.
This question is: if you guys could be more like the other in one way, what would it be?
I think that's, we're so opposite in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And I think that'd be pretty easy for us to answer, don't you think?
Go for it. Start.
You're decisive. You don't care what people think as much, and you just do whatever. So, If I could not care what people think as much, I might get more done. But it also might interrupt my ministry in a way that's not helpful. And maybe it's the same for you. Like if you were more feelers toward what everybody's thinking, it might not make ministry easier for you either.
Maybe. I think the first thing that comes to mind for me would be, I think you are better at management of time, margins in your life than I am, and have always been better at rest.
So if you could be more like me, you would be more lazy. Is that?
No. I mean that in like a positive Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
Take a day off. Go bike for the day.
For me, it's the only way to sustain time in the ministry.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's part of what I mean. I think I've not ever been good at that. What trait do you admire about the other? It's a similar question, I guess. But what trait do you admire about the other? I've always said that your preaching, Aaron teaches preaching. Every once in a while you go away and you're like, I've been in the presence of a master at his craft when Aaron preaches. So I have always admired that you take me places and I'm suddenly there and I go, I'm there. I'm not sure all the ways I got there, but I like it and I'm glad I'm there and I'm learning this because of it now. And a lot of that is storytelling in a way that brings a lot of people along. I think my preaching is like a narrower kind of field of people who are liking my style.
No, I don't.
So
think
you're a more natural communicator in terms of story and bringing people along emotionally.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that when you look at different preaching styles, it just depends on who you are as what'll work. Someone like Tim Keller tells almost no stories.
In a way, he's totally boring.
And very listenable
Yes.
at the same time.
Yes.
And then you've got other people.
Conversational even.
Yeah, and then you've got other people who tell stories and you don't know what you're learning, but all of a sudden you learned it all. I mean, obviously the classic example of that is Fred Craddock, or was Fred Craddock.
Yeah.
And so much of preaching is the sharing, like Phillips Brooks said, the sharing of the gospel through your personality.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important, I think, for preachers to develop their personality.
Their voice.
Yeah, to develop their time with Christ, their time and all that kind of stuff. It comes out whether you want it to or not.
Indeed, yes. D. Martin Lloyd-Jones said something similar. Preaching is a personality on fire, or something like that. What brings you to a place of uncontrollable laughter?
Ooh,
It's an interesting question.
that is a good question.
The kind of laughter that makes your cheeks or side hurt.
Yeah, I think that's usually like laughing at something in my past that someone brings up that's ridiculous that you did, or those kind of family stories that come back around. And
Which is the thing for you in the Wymers.
oh yeah, we were always great. I mean, we grew up telling stories at the table. My dad, chief among them. In fact, that's why I use stories in sermons. We're just a storytelling family. And I'll never forget when my wife Cindy, her mother, first visited our house, and all siblings were at the table with Cindy, who I was dating, and her mother, and we started telling stories, and we would only tell, I didn't realize this was going on, we would only tell like 7 or 8 words of a story, and everybody would laugh, and we would move on. So we never finished a story.
Nice.
And I remember looking over, seeing my mother-in-law watching us at the table going, like there was no way to follow what we were doing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I've been in those moments before where I've thought, oh, they've got a vocabulary and a history. I'm not tracking, but
Yeah. It's just there's a shorthand that comes from telling stories.
So what do you think of this gas shortage we're experiencing?
Temporary. It's a pain. I had to drive all the way to Greenville. I may not make it home.
I know, seriously.
Yeah.
Well, we'll provide you with some gas on the way home. What are UT's chances this fall?
UT's in football?
I guess, yeah.
Probably about like Florida. Neither of us are what we once were. And I'm looking forward to the day where
Florida's not really that great lately?
No. We're not going to win national championship anytime soon. So.
Okay. All righty.
I pray I'm wrong, but that's...
Indeed. So let's talk ministry and leadership. And what do you like most about preaching?
That's a good question. It's changed over the years. I think early on it was the process of writing, wrestling with the text, and coming up with the sermon. And I think that's still the case, but that's a lesson a little bit because I've been doing it for so long that it feels like it's time to freshen it up some. And there are times when it freshens up when you're not expecting it. But yeah, I think the preparing and the
process.
The creative process is my favorite thing. Standing in front of people, actually preaching is not the thing that I naturally gravitate toward.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that you've said that, I can see that a little bit. I think for me, the process is difficult, frustrating, hard. And I enjoy it at the same time. I enjoy it at the same time. But when I get to the actual preaching moment, that's when I'm like, but this is the part I love.
Okay.
And so for me, it's sort of like, it's hard. Well, I said that as if it's this trajectory. It's actually more like this trajectory. And then the preaching moment for me. Okay. You have always been and I'm sort of I have a way I do it, and I do it. I don't do different things much. You used to shake up how you do things a lot. Write an entirely narrative thing. Make up a story for the whole thing.
Early on, I did that and found it wasn't effective. But it still helped shape me.
Yes.
It wasn't wasted, but it wasn't an effective way to preach.
What part of those things for you weren't as helpful that are the reason why you don't do them as much now and you found a different voice or shape?
If people are trying to figure out what you're doing instead of finding out what you want them to find out, then you've led them along the wrong path.
They spend time and emotional energy as you're doing
like, what are you doing?
Trying to figure it out.
And so the fact that people kind of know my routine now, and even though I do occasionally go, I'm tired of telling stories about when I was a kid. But all those stories I try to use to at least introduce the point I want to lead them toward. And if people know that, then they're not lost in the sermon itself.
Right.
And hopefully that works. But, also changing it up is important so that you don't just get in a rut.
Yeah. I'm listening. I hear you. Okay.
Yeah, Scott. Change it up.
Yeah, change it up, boring man. Man, there's a lot of good questions. So, what part of ministry and leadership in Grandview and where you are all right now excites you for your future and you're encouraged about?
I think that's a good question, especially in the year that we've had.
Yeah.
Where we're just constantly trying to figure out where exactly we're going.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean, because we're coming off of a time where I'm like, and I can feel us right now, actually for the last couple months, but especially the last few weeks, it's like the things are starting to move forward, for us at least. What's that look like for y'all?
Well, as you know, we launched a second campus a month before the pandemic hit. And so the good part about that has been, I think, it's kept us focused on mission rather than maintenance. And the key, I think, for us is to continue to think mission, continue to think what we're shooting toward, and not get stuck in how do we keep what we've got. In terms,
and COVID has sort of kept that pressed as the thing you've got to keep forward because
I think the natural stance of people in a time of crisis is to circle the wagons.
Yes.
but we can't circle the wagons. We've got to push forward, because as I said this early on in the pandemic, how we get through the pandemic will determine who we are after the pandemic.
I remember you saying that, yes.
And if we are afraid the whole time in the pandemic, then we're going to be still fearful afterward. And it's a hard thing to fight, because when you have so many messages of fear in the culture, it easily drowns out the message of the gospel, which is bigger than that. It's just God. We may go through hard times, may lose our lives.
Sure.
The gospel will go forward.
That's right. So it has continued to press on, keeping that main thing the main thing for y'all?
I think so, yeah.
What does that look like in some practical terms for your future that you may be excited about, or that you guys are talking about, or that Grandview needs to make some headway in?
Yeah, we're working on a program for the fall to really listen to the voices in the congregation, to think about our past, think about where we are, and to think about our future. So you're doing some mission vision. Yes, that includes a lot of listening to the people in the congregation, because I found that's really important in terms of moving forward together.
Yeah.
And after this past year, it's really time to listen and to remember who we've been, pay attention to who we are, but more importantly, where we're going.
Yeah.
And so been working on a process for that we would launch in the fall. Don't know exactly what it looks like yet, but beginning to get our minds around it.
Yeah.
Because also, we're only a few years away as a congregation from being 100 years old. So soon we will
So it's part of thinking about that.
Yeah, and I don't want to celebrate being 100 by simply looking back.
Right.
I want it to be, okay, who are we now and where are we going?
Yeah. 4th Avenue?
Yeah, Fourth Christian Church.
Fourth Christian Church.
We were planted by First Christian Church, which met in what is now the downtown Christian Church building in Johnson City.
Yes.
So you think how close that was.
Oh, it's super close.
It's super close, but the idea was neighborhood churches.
Yeah.
And so Fourth Christian Church was begun not far from where we are now, and they pretty quickly became Virginia Street Christian Church.
That's right,
Virginia
that's
Street
what I was
Church
thinking.
of Christ.
Yes.
And then Christian Church, and then Grandview Christian Church in 1967. In the same spot, they renamed. And then when they put University Parkway in Johnson City, it took part of the property, and they sold us the lots where we are now as Grandview Christian Church.
Cool. And you've been there 23 years almost.
23 years. Which means by the time we're 100 years old, I will have been, if they don't fire me, I will have been a minister for a quarter of their life. That's
wow.
I haven't thought of that till just now. That's unfathomable, really. Yeah.
I have a couple jokes here from Paul that I'll just let go.
Okay.
You can enjoy them later.
Okay. I'm sure I will.
Paul has been interacting with us the whole time.
Okay. I can't wait to see.
We're glad you're with us, Paul.
Mostly.
At the moment. We three have been meeting and doing sermon collab for a while. And now it's ballooned into and mushroomed into a whole slew of people. What have been some of the helpful parts of working through sermon with others being a part of the process over the years?
I think the helpful part is we disagree on a lot of things. And again, for someone with my personality, I can see where you guys are coming from even when we disagree.
Yeah.
And that helps, I think, me keep from preaching stuff without the awareness that there are people who don't agree with what I'm saying.
Sure.
And I don't like preaching that doesn't allow room for people to go, I'm not quite with you, but I want to keep listening. Preaching that says this, and if you don't agree with every point of what I'm saying, you're just wrong. So just being a part of a group that doesn't agree with me and doesn't always affirm me, challenges me, that's been a big part of the sermon prep. It's also the discipline of getting it in, and no matter what else happens this week, you've had that time.
Yeah.
Like last week, we didn't talk about my sermon.
Yeah.
It was a rougher week.
Yeah.
Because
you don't have your head in the game early on through the week, because things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a pressure
Yeah.
every week, no matter what.
But even more than then really the sermon prep stuff for me is just the camaraderie of being in ministry together.
Yeah.
You know, I tell people when they're getting married that you need someone in your life who will support the marriage, but also let you complain when you feel like complaining, and understand that doesn't mean you're not happy with your spouse. You know,
right.
that once you get done just venting a little bit, they say get back in there. That's your wife.
Yeah.
And I think in ministry you need friends who allow you to go, I'm not good at this. I wish I was doing better at this. Who understand that you're saying that, but also understand that now you got to get back in and do it.
Yeah. That's good. I agree with all that. I also think it's been interesting how over the years there becomes this mutual understanding of, at least at some level, not just what ministry is like, but what ministry is like for us in our particular contexts. Mm-hmm. And so there's a quick dialogue of, hey, this is going on. What about this? What do you guys think about this? Let me run this by you. We're thinking about. So a lot of that sharing of ideas, not just about sermon stuff, but about church direction, about vision, and learning from what Paul's doing, what you're doing, what we're doing. All that kind of mutual sharing and understanding has been another piece of it that I've noticed in the last few years was going on, but.
Well, and as you know,
more and more fruit for the other churches than we ever thought.
Well, and as you know, we've had times where getting together wasn't easy for one of us or two of us.
Yeah, we've had little ebbs and flows.
Yeah, and where you kind of go, I don't see the value of this. And then, you know, but it's that commitment long term, just like we ask people to do in being a part of the church. It's that long-term commitment, even when it doesn't seem like you're getting something out of it. Right. That probably is where God is working on us the most.
And it turns out you're actually getting something out of it in ways you didn't realize at the time, but looking back, you realize, oh, yeah, I am.
So in a lot of ways, I think we're practicing together what we ask people to practice in the church.
The community that we're asking people to be involved in, no question.
Even when you drive me crazy, Scott.
Even when I am totally different than you in most ways.
Yes, absolutely.
So you're saying I more drive you crazy than you're.
Well, mostly Paul drives us crazy, but that's okay. You know?
Who's the peacemaker between the three? Is Paul or are you because there's no way I'm in the middle of the two of you.
No, generally. Not. But like I remember a time when you had some questions about something I said that you were worried that I was angry at you or that I was dismissive of you, and you called me and said, "Hey, what's the deal?" You didn't act like there wasn't an issue. You let me know that I'd said something that made you bristle.
Okay. I believe you. Yeah. I'm sure it happened.
Do you want me to tell it here?
I don't remember it at all.
I don't think you want me to mention it. But yeah, you just called and said, "Hey,
I vaguely remember.
Do you think this about
that.
me? Is this, something I said made you think I thought something about you?" And you're like, "Is
do
that
you
what
really
you
think I'm that much of a punk?" Or
something like that. Yeah. At which point I said, "Of course I do."
Of course I think that, dummy.
How did you not know that?
Yes. You're the last one to find that out, huh? The rest of us think that.
I don't think we have needed peacemakers because we've all dealt with it just by talking to each other for the most part.
Right, yeah. Good stuff. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on
Coffee Convos. Do we end with another click?
We did tonight.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. See you.